Welcome back. It is time for Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you subscribe to the show, thank you. If you don't, make sure you subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Also, a hearty hello to our listeners on the Bet in Las Vegas. That's right, on the radio in Las Vegas with our Odyssey station there. So thank you guys for joining us. It is one of our final shows before the draft, and to do that and to talk about the draft, the Raiders clearly first round draft pick, number 7 overall. And I bring in my broadcast partner, as always. He's a national NFL writer at Bleacher Report. That is my good friend, Mo Moton. Mo, here we go. We have one of your colleagues on tonight to talk about the draft, talk about what the Raiders might be up to and what's going on. Of course, yesterday, finally, the world can sit and sleep well tonight knowing that Aaron Rodgers has finally been traded. And so now we can get past that national nightmare and get on to the draft.
Here in New York, New Jersey, that it's finally done. People were starting to get nervous. There were rumors that the 49ers might jump in because of their quarterback situation, but I didn't buy into the 49ers rumors. I just knew it was probably just a matter of time. Joe Douglas promised that Aaron Rodgers is on his way. He delivered on that promise.
Joe Douglas promise. There you go. All right, so now we're going to get right to it. Our guest tonight is Matt Holder from Bleacher Report. His life for the last, I don't know how many months, Matt, has been all nothing but player evaluation and the draft. It's almost over, and then you get to evaluate how everybody did. But you can follow Matt, by the way, on Twitter at mholder95. Catch his work also up on Silver and Black Pride. Thanks for being with us tonight, buddy.
I mean, it definitely has been a long process, and I don't think anybody's more excited for Thursday to come and go, or this whole weekend, I guess, to come and go than I am. It's been a long process, but I'm excited.
I know. Obviously, since I host a show with Mo multiple times a week, I know what his schedule is. And then we talked about having you on the show months ago, and Mo kept saying, yeah, okay, let's get him at the very end when he's got all his work done, and he's just kind of waiting until it happens. So we wanted to do that, and we certainly appreciate you being here.
Scott,
go ahead, Mo.
Matt's work is never done.
They're
going to be looking at 2024 draft process right after. So they're just nonstop marathon runners.
I know. I always appreciate those, like after the draft is over, that first round of stories that hits the next morning saying, okay, let's look at 24. So yes.
So to give you guys a little bit of a preview of what we got going on at Bleacher Report, to Mo's point, I'm actually writing the 2024 mock draft the day after this is all over. So yeah, exactly. It just never stops. But yeah, I'm at least excited to talk about some different guys next year. But no, good to talk about the guys we got going on Thursday too.
Yes, and we're going to get into the Raiders and Matt also too. You can see he's wearing an Oakland shirt. Matt is, even though he's a objective journalist when he's covering these issues, he's a Raiders fan. So let's just get that out there. So I know all of our listeners will want to follow you now too, because you're part of the nation there. But let's start macro here for a second, Matt. When I ask you this question first to start it off, is this NFL draft, of course, when there's quarterbacks, they take a lot of the steam out of the room because everybody wants to talk about the quarterbacks. There's a couple great ones, or at least could be great in this class. Then it kind of falls off a little bit. They have Anthony Richardson, a raw talent who could be great. All that stuff happening. But if you had to sum up the 2023 NFL draft in its totality with a couple words, what would they be?
With a couple words, I can give you one, and I think it'll do it pretty well, which is project. I think there's a lot of guys that are projects, a lot of guys that, if you look at this class as a whole, I released a top 20 or top 32, big board for Bleacher Report, and only 2 guys were on it, and those 2 were Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. They were pretty high because they're pretty good players, but again, only 2 out of, compared to I think the 2021 class had about 10 guys on it, And I think at every position, there are a lot of guys who you say, I really like this guy, but he's got this thing, or he's got to develop. He's got it. There's a bunch of edge rushers who I can think of off the top of my head, like BJ Ojolari, Will McDonald, that, they need to get bigger against the run. And the same thing with the other way around with guys that are good run defenders and not quite good pass rushers and that need to develop. And then, of course, there's Anthony Richardson too, who's kind of the big enigma in this whole draft class that has everyone split. And the reason for that being is because he's such a project, because he's not a finished product by any means. So I think if I had to choose one word, even to describe this whole draft class, it would be project.
Now, I got a lightning rod Anthony Richardson question for you later. I prepared you for that, but we'll get to that later. I want to go back to the beginning of this process, and I know you were at the combine, so I want to get your expertise in what you saw with your own eyes on eyes because it's different when you get up close and see these prospects versus watching from a laptop, from a tablet, watching their film. You get to see how big they are. You get to see how they move, things of that nature. So were there any prospects that you saw with your own eyes at the combine that fit what the Raiders are trying to do or going to do in 2023?
I think one of the first guys that like stood out the most was definitely Tyree Wilson. One, because when he stretched out his arms to show off his arm length, that like was longer than the podium that he was standing at. So that was one of the first biggest takeaways is just seeing how long that guy's arms are in general. And then two, kind of like what you're talking about, being able to compare guys, side by side and size wise, is Anthony Richardson, even compared to like a Will Levis, who's a little bit bigger. And obviously we know CJ Stroud's a little bit skinnier. And then there's Bryce Young, who's the big anomaly and all that stuff. But seeing him compared to everyone else and being that side by side where you're like, okay, yeah, this guy is built a little bit different. This guy is very clearly the most physically gifted quarterback in this draft class. And I think those were my two biggest takeaways just from seeing those guys. That, and I was talking about this after the combine as much, but Darnell Washington's neck, which I still need to get the read on. I still think it's like 30 inches, something like that.
That's crazy. Well, obviously, Matt, the Raiders have, as Mo and I have talked about over the last couple of weeks, the Raiders have a long list of things that they need. If you look at up the middle on defense, everything. They need everything there. They still need cornerback help. They need offensive line help. When you look at that shopping list and you look at what this team has to do to start to even be able to compete in the AFC West with what's happening there, and the top two teams, I guess at this point you'd call the Chiefs and the Chargers. Can they address enough of those needs this season to get them in a position where they could, at least after maybe this 1 year of rebuilding, catapult themselves into being a bona fide playoff team in the near future?
Yeah, I definitely think, the last part of your question there, where you're talking about maybe looking into a few years down the road, I definitely think, or a year down the road, I definitely think they could be in a position to compete. One of the biggest things is they've got to get pass rushers, kind of like what you talked about, both interior and exterior. Hopefully the hope is that Chandler Jones will find the fountain of youth this year and get back to his normal 10 sack self. But even if he isn't, or even if he does, he's still, 33, 34 years old at that point going into next year. And they could use, one of those developmental guys that I was talking about that could take over once he retires. And of course, got to get some pass rush up in the middle. That was something that's been lacking for, I feel like, a few years now with the Raiders. So I definitely think, if they can get two guys like that in a division with Justin Herbert, in a division with Patrick Mahomes, and who knows how well Russell Wilson can do with the different coaching staff, I definitely think those are, things that the Raiders need to do, is be able to find ways to affect the passing game defensively and get after the quarterback specifically. And if they can draft the right guys, if they can get, maybe a Tyree Wilson in the first round, or Keon White maybe as a 3 technique defensive tackle in the second, or something like that, who again is another guy that's a project, then that's going to start to help them build out their defense to be able to compete and hopefully at least slow down some of these high-powered offenses in the AFC West.
So let's fast forward to today, right? Well, the current, right? We're in the week of the draft, and it's just, there are rumors that came out at the beginning of the week that the Raiders are tied to Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern. Now, I believe that pick caused a lot of discussion within Raider Nation on social media. Some people like the pick. Some people are okay with the pick. Some people hate the pick. I'm one of the people that think it could be a mistake. And I'm not saying that because I think Skoronski is going to be a bust. But I think that at 7, even if you're not going to start him at tackle because of his short arms and you're going to move him inside, I don't think it's great value to get a guard at 7. That's just my opinion. What do you think of those rumors, and how would you feel if the Raiders picked Skoronski at 7?
I'm right there with you, Mo, with Skoronski at 7, and basically the same logic. Like, I've kind of talked about this on Tape Don't Lie with Marcus Johnson. Is Skoronski is a great player. I think Skoronski could probably be a good pro even if they pick him at 7. But it's kind of like getting socks for Christmas when you wanted an Xbox or something like that. It's like, yeah, you get this solid player. He's probably going to be, a starter for at least the rookie contract, maybe even earn a second contract. But when you look at the top 10, especially if there is going to be a run on quarterbacks where a lot of these really good defensive players are going to be available, it definitely feels like you're leaving meat on the bone. And the guards that I like are guys like Steve Avila, who'd be available in the second round, who I think could come in and be an immediate starter. And there are a few guys like that on the interior that I think you can find on day 2 that can be a bigger help. And then with Skoronski, I can't say I've dove too much into his game, but talking with Brandon Thorne, who's on our team over at Bleacher Report, is he views him as more of a guard and his projection. And Brandon's obviously someone who I respect quite a bit in the industry, and I think a lot of people do too. So again, it's kind of like you can't hate the pick because you can never have too many offensive linemen, but at the same time, you kind of can hate the pick because it was a top 10 pick that you're spending on a guy that is going to play a lesser value position. And I think another position too, there again, you could have gotten a quality starter and a year one starter in the beginning of round 2.
So Matt, here, let me ask you this. So we're going to stick with this number 7 pick, if that's where indeed the Raiders stay and pick. You probably know from talking to Mo, being a colleague of his, and I'm there with him, we are all aboard the Devin Witherspoon train if he is there. But my question is not on Devin Witherspoon. My question is on Jalen Carter. If Jalen Carter's there at 7 and you're the Raiders, do you pass on him? I mean, listen, they need the cornerback, but that we just talked about what they need to do on the defensive front. Can you pass up a talent like that at number 7 if he's there?
It's funny. I've gotten this question. It feels like almost at least once, maybe probably twice a week for the last month or so since the combines happened. And my answer has kind of been the same this whole time. Is part of the issue with Jalen Carter, I think, just from an optics perspective, it is a little close to the Henry Ruggs situation, and that's not. I know it's different situations, but not a great PR move by the Raiders if they were going to do that. And I could see, a situation where I know Mark Davis is hands off, but he might step in and say, guys, can we get someone else? Can we get one of these top corners like Devin Witherspoon, who's, doesn't have a track record quite like Jalen Carter's? And I've kind of come to the conclusion of with Jalen Carter, obviously he got his legal issue resolved. And I don't know if you guys saw the body cam video, but it does seem like, he at least in a bad situation did the right thing of sticking around. He didn't appear intoxicated from what I saw, which I know some people irresponsibly reported and all that good stuff. So I definitely think, that situation is taken care of. Almost the bigger situation, which is kind of hate to admit a little bit from a certain standpoint, is him showing up out of shape to his pro day, because obviously that's a big job interview and he flunked it. Like, there's no getting around it. Right. And obviously he had a lot of stuff going on, but which I think can explain, what could happen. And I think you could justify it because obviously he had things that were a little bit more important than working out or than figuring all that stuff out. So I've kind of come to the point with Jalen Carter where if he's there and the Raiders take him, I'll be happy with it because obviously they're getting a stud. And that would tell me, or at least lead me to believe, that those interviews that he had with Dave Ziegler, with Josh McDaniels, and with the Raiders brass went well, and he was able to explain it away, and they don't have any concerns with them. And at the same time, if he's there and they pass, they're not going to be okay with that too, because again, he comes with a long background. They did their homework on him. We know they had him in for a top 30 visit, and at least they went through those steps to kind of cross him off the list in that regard, to maybe where he didn't quite interview well, or they didn't quite like his answers. So it's kind of at a situation where, obviously you want to have the great player, but I wouldn't hate them passing or whatever they end up deciding to do, because those interviews are the biggest part of Jalen Carter's evaluation at this point. And that's something that, we'll probably never have an idea of what exactly happened until, or at least not for a few years, until someone leaks it at some point.
Bleacher Report guys sticking together in their thinking process. I basically said the same thing as Matt on the show, that if the Raiders take him, it means that Jalen convinced them of, maybe some preconceived notions, talked to him with the ledge, maybe cleared up some things that they thought. If they pass on him, that means that they still feel there's some red flags there, and I'm okay either way. But I want to move on to a more fun topic in question. And I think it's fun because of how Scott and I feel about these two prospects. But I'll ask you the question. If the Raiders... if you're the GM, Dave Ziegler, and you had a chance to get Anthony Richardson at 7 or Hendon Hooker in the second round, knowing that you can get both prospects, what would you do if you wanted a quarterback and you had to choose one scenario?
Well, Mo, I think I'm going to be on your side again, on this one again, because I am a big Anthony Richardson fan. And
he's going to be a tight end.
And I'm saying
he's going to be tight end, Matt.
I don't know. I don't know about that one, but the one thing, and I was going to say, I'm a big Anthony Richardson fan. I'm also not a fan of Hendon Hooker, so that's kind of an easier question for me. I think on our BR big board, he's got like a 6th round grade, something like that. It's definitely low down there. The biggest thing with me with Hendon Hooker is he's 25 years old, was a 1-year wonder, only really started 1 year, I think, or started a little bit at Virginia Tech too, but was really only good for this past season. in an offense that doesn't translate to a lot of success in the NFL. And he's 25 years old coming off a torn ACL. Where at least with Anthony Richardson, yes, he's a 1 year wonder too. And this last year wasn't nearly as good as Hendon Hooker's was. Anthony Richardson is also 20 years old. Like I can work with that and not coming off an injury. Like I can work with a guy like that. And I think one thing that's underrated about Anthony Richardson's development is this past year, Florida got a brand new coaching staff. So he had to learn a new system, probably had to learn a little bit more new techniques and all that stuff too. So I think where a lot of the stuff that you can get knock on him or, his mechanics, I think that was easy for him to slide a little bit when he's got to learn a new playbook, learn a new coaching staff and all this good and all that stuff. And as well as, take over as his first year as a starter. So to me, that almost gives him a little bit more ceiling where, you can go to a situation like Las Vegas where he doesn't have to play right away. They have Brian Hoyer, even if Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt, so where Anthony Richardson doesn't have to get thrown into the fire and lose some confidence, where I kind of like that structure for him where he can sit and develop, he can learn, he can pick up the playbook, and then next year hopefully have the same one as he did before, which he didn't have this past year at Florida.
Okay, but the important question is, would you eat warm potato salad?
Never.
Okay.
Never.
See, okay. So
I'm working on that with Matt.
Mo, we're even one apiece. But Matt, before we let you go, buddy, and we certainly appreciate you spending all this time with us. But when you look at this Raiders draft, Mo said it on our last show, I believe it was. He said, "Listen, it'll be a good draft if the Raiders get 2 starters out of this, maybe a third or even a 4th starter, or at the very worst, you get two great first line starters." And a 3rd and a 4th guy who are rotation guys that can develop maybe into starters in the future. When you look at that, not only in your position and evaluating all of this talent, but also as a fan, what should Raider fans and Raider Nation walk away from this draft saying, hey, that was a good draft for us?
I mean, I think I'd probably have to up it one more and go with 3 starters. I think with 12 picks, especially after getting that extra one for Darren Waller, what is that? 5 is that 5 that they have in the top 100, or is it just 4?
4.
4, just 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think with that, I think they need to get 3 starters. I think like you look at defensively, you probably need 9 to 10 starters outside of Max Crosby. And I think, when we look at how much resources they have with this draft class, and who knows, they may even pick up more picks by trading back on Thursday night too. I think the Raiders realistically need to walk away with about 3 starters, which is going to be tough to do, but in any draft class. But again, they've got the resources to be able to do it. I feel like we're going to see them move one direction or another, where at some point on one of the first 2 nights and maybe pick up some extra top 100 picks. And yeah, I feel like through those 4 top 100. And probably first 4 rounds, you probably got to get at least like 3 starters. Hopefully, get one in the later rounds that ends up surprising you.
Well, good. So now tell us, Mo, we got to get them to tell us 7. Are they going to trade down, or are they going to take a pick there?
I think I get the feeling that they're going to end up trading down, especially with the quarterback craziness that's been going on. Like if Tyree Wilson's not available and Will Anderson's not available, which I think we all kind of assume, but especially if, those 2 guys go in the top 5, I get the feeling we're going to get a bit of trade back so that maybe one of those quarterbacks slides to 7. I think Peter King today wrote a column that said there's a chance Stroud falls out of the top 7, which I'm assuming means the Raiders would pass on him. So if the Raiders are going to pass on him, might as well trade it back for someone that wants to move up and get him. So yeah, I feel like we're in I feel like we're headed for some movement backwards.
Nice. Okay. So Matt, before you go, tell everybody where they can find your work and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so just follow me on Twitter. You can find everything. I post everything on there. AdamHolder95, up on silverandblackpride.com. All the Raiders stuff going on over there, and then doing some NFL draft work with Bleacher Report, like Mo had mentioned. I got my top 32 big board of the last years. Got some landing spots for sleeper running backs, and coming up soon, gonna have 5 teams who might be surprises. Not the Raiders, but to trade up for a quarterback.
Nice.
Not going off with the conventional and trying to find some other teams that might be in the market with this craziness.
Well, Matt, listen, man, I congratulate you. I've watched you kind of ascend and what you've done, the great work you've done over the last couple of years, as all Raider fans have done as well. And of course, they root for you because you're one of them. And so congratulations on all the success and continued success ahead.
Appreciate it, guys. Appreciate you guys for having me on.
All right, there you go. Matt Holder from Bleacher Report, Silver and Black Pride as well. You could catch him there. too. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Mo and I roll on here on a Tuesday before the NFL draft. It is Silver and Black today. We'll be back right after these words. Welcome back. Silver and Black today rolls on, an Odyssey original podcast. If you don't already subscribe to the podcast, please do it wherever you get your audio. Again, another thank you to Matt Holder from Bleacher Report, and also to my co-host Mo Moton, who had to run as well. They're all on deadline for the draft, so Mo had to cut out a little bit early. And joining me now is my producer, David Stepanian, live from Las Vegas with us here today. So David, listen, you heard what Matt had to say about the draft, particularly when it comes to the macro draft. When we talk about overall looking at the 2023 slate of players coming out of college available to the Raiders, and he said projects. I think that's true. Obviously, a cornerback, it's not true. Cornerback, it's the deepest cornerback draft in probably the last 12 years. But in other spots like quarterback, other spots like linebacker, not as strong. What did you think of what Matt had to say there in his take? Do you agree with all of it?
Yeah, it's really funny that you mention it, Scott, because just out of curiosity, I pulled up my sportsbook app and I was looking at who are the Raiders, what position are they most likely to pick? Cornerbacks was actually number one at plus 125.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was really funny that he was mentioning that. But yeah, just looking at how look, we're just kind of throwing darts here. None of us know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's all guessing.
Thursday. Because you look at how 2 weeks ago I would have told you CJ Stroud is going number one, and now it's Bryce Young. There's just no way to know what's going to go down Thursday. We're just doing our best to guess at it. But yeah, I think if you look at it, the odds makers are saying the same thing. Raiders are going to go corner.
Yeah, I listen, and it makes sense. And you talk about it being guessed. You talk about CJ Stroud, which I still like CJ Stroud. And if the Raiders had a chance to get him, I'd be okay with that. I don't think they will. But you had Peter King write just this week that CJ Stroud might fall past 7. It goes to show you going in, nobody knows what's going on. I mean, clearly somebody like Peter King's well connected, but not that connected. These guys, these GMs, the people in the Raiders front office, all of these folks, they're not going to give you their plan. They're not going to tell you what their scenarios are. And if CJ Stroud's there at 7, do they take him? Do they trade down, let someone else take him, and then get what they really want and pick up some more picks? Because Lord knows this team needs a lot of players to help it get where it wants to go. So from my perspective, yes, that's what I like about where it's going. The Raiders need a lot, David. They need, we talked about it. They need all throughout the middle of the defense. They need cornerbacks. They need some more offensive line help. They even need tight end help. They can get later in the draft with a younger player. But the point here is the Raiders don't have to be cute. They can stay where they're at and get the players they need. Or if they can trade down in the first round, let's say into the teens, not too low, they might still be able to get an impact cornerback like a Joey Porter Jr. if the Gonzaleses and the Witherspoons are gone. So the Raiders, I think they just they should not try to get too cute. Don't try to outsmart the room. Do what you can to get the best value, get guys on the roster, get those rookie contracts in there, and let's start turning this team around.
Yeah, and going back to what Matt said in the last segment, I really liked your conversation about how many starters are the Raiders going to get out of this draft. And I think 3 is kind of a lucky number. I would be very happy if they could get 3. I think 2 is maybe a little more likely. But, the draft is always really hard to nail down. And if the Raiders can get a couple of great quality guys who could start for the next few years, I think they'll be happy with that. This draft, like Matt said, a lot of projects, and it's going to be tough to nail down. I can't imagine what's going on in that war room on Thursday. It kind of would be interesting to be a fly on the wall there. But again, it's just such a tough thing to nail down.
Yeah, and again, I think you have to look at this whole thing as you see in the graphic there as chess, not checkers, right? Because of course, Raider Nation wants their team to be good as quickly as it can. And the Raiders do need to make progress here, right? This coaching staff, this GM, even though he's only in his second year, they've got to make a lot of movement in the right direction, okay? You can't stay stagnant or be in a rebuild for multiple years, especially now today's NFL, where you could build pretty quickly And the Raiders have an offensive core. I mean, you look at Devontae Adams, you look at Josh Jacobs, at least for this year. You look at now Jimmy Garoppolo. These guys that they brought in, they have the tools on offense to get it done. They need to improve that defense while also bolstering that offense. So to me, it's all about this year and next. I know fans, again, want it all this year, but the draft next year is significantly better. The Raiders, even if they improve over last year, would still be in a good position in the middle of the first round to get some good players. So I think that's the thing, Raider fans. I know they're tired, David. You've been a Raider fan your entire life. They're tired hearing the word patience, but I think you need just a little more.
Yeah, it's certainly been a long couple of decades for being a Raider fan. Thanks for reminding me, Scott.
Yeah, not only that. Hey, listen, I get guys my age and older who say, 2 decades? What are you talking about? It's been longer than that.
I mean, well, before us, there were Cubs fans who didn't win a World Series for like 100 years. So
right.
At least
you don't want that.
At least it's not that bad. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying about next year's draft is true. And if the team does improve, they get a better win-loss record. They're not going to have as good of a draft position next season. And I think a lot of that will depend on Jimmy G's health. If he gets injured, we have Brian Hoyer at backup, but that was more of a Josh McDaniels New England type of deal. If they can I don't see CJ Stroud falling to number 7. I don't know if there's going to be a QB at number 7 on the board, but I still think if you get a shot at a QB, I think drafting one of those guys will be in a great position to back up Jimmy G.
Yeah, and listen, they need to get a third quarterback on the roster, and no, it's not Chase Garbers. So they'll look to do something. I think they'll look to a young guy later in the draft, perhaps, as a developmental project. See if he can make the roster. If he makes the roster, then he's inactive and he's the third quarterback. So it's important, though. I think you're right, because of the history of Garoppolo, they need to do that. But I think when you go into the draft on Thursday, oh, by the way, just a reminder, Thursday morning we'll have a special episode to be available for you, just a little quick draft preview from Mo and I. And then Thursday night, of course, I will be live with Brian Baldinger and Jason LaCanfora on the Odyssey live draft report. I will be right on as the Raiders select number 7, if they still select number 7. If not, wherever they select in the first round. I'll be joining them live there. You can catch it on the Odyssey app, or you can catch it on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. Mo will be live on the Bleacher Report app starting at the top of the draft until the Raiders pick as well. So make sure you check that out. Just a reminder of all the content coming up. But I think, fans overall, I think Raider fans were feeling not very excited about the draft. But as we move into these final days before it happens, David, I feel a little bit of a turnaround. I think a lot of Raider Nation is starting to realize, okay, we're going to get some young talent here. And even if they don't like Josh McDaniels, they feel good about the talent available when the Raiders pick, and that the Raiders, for once, maybe in the last few years, don't mess up that first round draft pick.
Yeah, I think this is a great year. I'm just looking at the odds again because there's just so much talent here in the first round. I really feel like whoever they end up with at number 7, if they stick to that pick, I really feel like you're going to get a guy that the fan base can get behind, and it's going to show a lot of promise. I think the position they draft is going to have a lot to do with that. Yes. But I think regardless, at number 7, it's stacked with quality, and you're going to get a guy. Again, we'll see with the new regime, but I think you're going to get a guy that the fans can get behind.
Yeah, I do too. Listen, it's going to be, to me, you get a quality defensive player at number 7, a guy people can get excited about, especially if it's Devin Witherspoon. Yes, I'm biased. Then I think Raider Nation will be excited about that because they know it's a need and they're getting a guy. It's not a reach, right? We saw John Gruden and Mike Mayock reach many times, and every time they got burned on it, okay? Jonathan Abram, right? We saw that, what happened with there. We saw Cleve Farrell. And even Colton Miller, who's turned out to be a good player, was a reach. So I think as long as the Raiders pick one of the best available talents there at a need position, they'll be fine. So it'll be exciting. And that's coming up just in a couple of days. Well, we're going to take our last break right now here on Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. When we come back, David and I will close out the show. We'll talk a little hodgepodge. We'll talk a little bit about Mark Davis talking that trash about the Las Vegas A's, coming up right after the break. You're listening to Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Don't go anywhere or I will find you. Welcome back to the final stretch here on Silver and Black Today, the Tuesday edition ahead of the NFL draft. Yes, the waiting is over. Yes, get rid of the mock drafts and all the crap, the rumors. Forget about it. Coming up Thursday, The real deal happens in KC. Yes, the draft is in Kansas City at Union Station, a very beautiful building. I used to live there. Nice spot where maybe the Raiders will pick their next all-pro in the first round. You never know. So we'll do that again. A reminder, catch Mo on the Bleacher Report app on Thursday, Draft Night Live, starting at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. He'll be with you on the Bleacher Report app up until the Raiders pick. I will be on the Odyssey Live NFL 2023 draft coverage, which you can catch right on the free Odyssey app. I'll be with Baldy. Yes, Brian Baldinger and Jason La Canfora. You can catch me right around the time the Raiders pick. So if you're listening to the show, tune in around the 6th pick, if they're still at 7, that is. And I'll be right with you there to give you my instant reaction and talk with the guys about what the Raiders did in the first round. So make sure you tune into that. The show starts at 4 Eastern, 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern, and the draft starts an hour later. So they do a pre-draft. I will be on again at pick number 7. So do that. We're closing out the show now. Myself and our producer and our correspondent, David Stepanian, joins me. Blah, blah, if I could spit out your name, David. As Mo had to leave a little bit early to do some draft coverage, he'll be back with me on Thursday morning for our special early morning YouTube and podcast for Thursday. So prepare for that as well. All right, David. So we're going to get to the grab bag. First of all, we talked about it on Monday. We finally saw the trade happen. Green Bay Packers trade Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. 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 It finally happened. I'm just happy that it's over. I called it the long national nightmare, going back to some Watergate terminology there. But finally, he ends up in New York, and the Jets gave up a pretty penny. The interesting thing about all the compensation, I think too much, that they gave up for Aaron Rodgers is the Jets are still a very well-equipped team, and they have the ability to stay there because they have a young roster, which is the whole point for the Raiders to draft a young defense.
Yeah, I think when you look at this trade, I wonder if it hurt the Jets a little bit. If we kind of knew Aaron Rodgers is going to the Jets for like a month now, and I kind of wonder if that incentivized Green Bay to kind of ask for a lot
more.
Because because we kind of already know that this deal is being done, and that hurt the Jets in the end because they gave quite a lot for a guy who's going to play 1, maybe 2 years, and that's another condition I saw. What if Rodgers plays some percentage of snaps, then they get a first round pick. Yeah, the pick improves. They get a first round pick next year. It's a lot for someone Rodgers' age, and especially after missing the playoffs last year. He had back-to-back MVPs in the last few years, but Scott, you're right. They kind of got fleeced on this one.
Yeah, and listen, I get it. I think the Jets are obviously a better team with Aaron Rodgers there, even at his advanced age, if you will. But the Jets, I don't think it's not like a trade that instantly makes them a Super Bowl contender. Does it make them a playoff team? Absolutely. Does it make them perhaps make a run in the playoffs? Perhaps, but I think they have some more work to be done there. So we'll have to see what they're able to do. And if this hamstrings them from doing that, then maybe you get your quarterback, but it's just not enough to get you over the hump. But exciting for Jets fans at the very least that they get their guy. All right, we move ahead. We talked about earlier in the show this idea that C.J. Stroud may move past 7. We're also hearing about teams perhaps wanting to trade up. New Orleans is now one of those that we're hearing about, maybe wanting to trade up into the draft area where they could get a quarterback if Stroud were to fall, which might benefit the Raiders. They might be able to glean a bunch of picks from it. But I don't put much stock in this. I think these are teams really jockeying, thinking, and trying to see if they can get offers for these spots, even if C.J. Stroud's not there. If you can convince somebody that he's going to fall and then make a trade earlier or at least get your value out of your pick if you want to trade down, that's what I think we're seeing here. I think we're seeing a lot of agent front office activity here. I don't really buy into this idea that he's going to fall or that a bunch of these teams are going to trade up in a quarterback draft class, which is good from 1 to 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks, but past that, not very.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the beast, Scott. And you kind of just hear all these rumors leading up to the draft. Look, every year there's always a big surprise that happens early in the draft. It happens every year. And whether that maybe, I think it'll be just as surprising if we see 4 straight QBs in the top 4 of the draft as it would be to see CJ Stroud fall out of the top 4. Something crazy is going to happen. I don't know if CJ Stroud drops out of the top 3, but I think we might see a record number of trades depending on how the top few picks of this draft goes.
Really interesting. It could happen. It could happen. I think we'll see. I mean, we're coming up on a Thursday, so it'll be interesting. Okay, so we're going to close out the show talking about this because the big news, and we have to talk about it here. Yes, we're not a baseball podcast. We talk about the Las Vegas Raiders football team, but the Las Vegas Raiders were once the Oakland Raiders. Of course, they were LA and they were Oakland again before that. But nonetheless, the Oakland A's have, in essence, and Major League Baseball, without yet approving it, kind of tacitly gave approval through their commissioner, as they have all along this process. But it appears now it's pretty much a done deal, except for where they're going to play, because the A's still need to get funding in the state of Nevada. But David, I'll tell you what, Mark Davis, who had a bad relationship with the A's because of the lease at the Oakland Coliseum, came out and ripped the A's and their plan to move to Las Vegas because of what happened in Oakland. I'm not surprised by it, but again, if these two teams are going to share a city again, it really makes for just some strange bedfellows, because the A's now coming in, listen, the ownership group in Oakland is hated by almost everybody, every A's fan, because of what they did. The Moneyball stuff, and they made a movie about it, was successful to a certain degree. But then when they didn't get the stadium they wanted, they started to strip the thing down, and that really hurt the fans up in Oakland. And so now they're going to move to Las Vegas, build a 35,000-seat dome stadium just off the Las Vegas Strip where the Wild West Casino now sits. It's a dump. It's a truck stop where ladies of the night service truck drivers. Trust me, that's what it is, David. You know I'm telling the truth here. Mm-hmm. So they're going to clean up that area, and you're going to have an amazing sports district continue to be built in Las Vegas. David, were you surprised by Mark Davis said? What about what he said and the validity of it?
No, I wasn't surprised at all, because this goes back so long, and I live 10 minutes away from the location where they want to build this stadium. And Wild Wild West is already torn down. It's just a bunch of dirt there now, and Station Casinos trying to sell that land for a while. But yeah, as soon as the A's kind of had this interest to moving in Vegas, Rob Manfred was all for it. And why wouldn't he be? They're not drawing a lot of fans in Oakland. But I just think, the whole thing about Mark Davis is, they want taxpayer dollars. The A's want taxpayer dollars, and they want $500 million from people like me who live in Vegas and pay taxes here. This feud between Davis and the A's goes way back. And I think that this whole A's moving to Vegas thing, especially kind of without league approval, there's a lot that could be said about this. And I think at the end of the day, the city of Oakland has most of the blame because these teams just want to get out of here. The Warriors left, the A's left, and the A's haven't left yet. The Raiders left, and the A's are about to leave. So I think you can mostly blame the city and the mayor.
Yeah, and you're thinking about the timeline here is the A's would be playing in that new stadium 4 years from now. So 2027, where they play in the interim.
Well, how about this? They might move to Summerlin in the next 2 years. They might play in the Summerlin ballpark because they're averaging less than 10,000 fans in Oakland right now.
Yeah, and they could get 10 or 11 there.
They could sell out every single one of those seats in Summerlin. Yeah,
and I know, too, some of the plans. So if you haven't seen the Aviators ballpark in Summerlin, which is a nice suburb right near where David lives, in West Las Vegas, the western side of Las Vegas, it's a beautiful ballpark. It has a pool in center field you can rent out. What I've now read is that if the A's were to move there temporarily for a couple years, they would probably put more seating out there and try to get it closer to 15,000 as well, which would be about half of what they would have in the new ballpark. So a good plan. Why not? It'll be hot as heck, of course, but the Aviators play in it. So the A's can do that too and just do very few home games when it gets really hot, day games when it gets really hot. But I'm interested because I'm a baseball guy, David, but they estimate almost half of the fans that will come see the A's in Las Vegas will be tourists, which I don't know that I buy. I don't know if I buy that
No,
for baseball.
no, that's absolutely not true. But you wouldn't be able to tell because everyone I know here, I already have a favorite baseball team.
Yeah.
I mean, you already.
They're going to go see their favorite team.
Nobody, and there's no A's fans.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. There's no A's fans here. I'm going to go whenever they play the Yankees. If you lived here, I'm sure you would go see them every once in a while to see because they don't play the Padres. But I'm not an A's fan. And no, a lot of people who live here, they're not going to switch teams for the A's.
What's interesting, and I know we're getting into baseball talk. Yeah. But what is that there's the idea of radical realignment in Major League Baseball. I don't know if you've seen that, David, where they would get rid of American and National Leagues and align teams geographically. So you could be looking, if you haven't seen that, go look it up, and to the listeners out there too, if you're baseball fans, go look it up, where you would have a division that would have Oakland, San Francisco, San Diego, the 2 Los Angeles teams, and Seattle. That would be one division in baseball, or they split it up, I think, maybe into a Pacific division. So very interesting. So the Padres, the A's, the Dodgers, can you imagine? Now, that I could believe. If you have the Padres where they're going right now, people are on the bandwagon. You have the Dodgers and the Angels and the Giants all playing in Vegas 3, maybe 4 times a year. Yeah, I could see that being a big draw because Vegas is full of Dodger fans, as you know, anyway. Ton of Dodger fans. So...
Yeah, I think it's mostly Dodger fans here. I mean, let's be blunt about it, and that's not going to change if the A's come here. There were a lot of Raiders fans here already.
Yes,
so
there were.
That worked out a little differently. And if, as a season ticket holder, 90% the visiting crowd issue isn't a big deal for most of the home games. There's just certain teams that travel well.
Right.
There's just certain teams that travel well. The thing about baseball, though, is like I said, you grow up watching the sport and you grow up having a favorite team. And not many people chose the A's as their favorite team. Here in Vegas, especially. You know, there's more Dodgers fans than Padres fans, for sure.
And the writing's been on the wall for several years, but I do feel bad again for the Oakland fans. They lost their football team. Their basketball team moved across the Bay to San Francisco, and now their baseball team is going to leave. It's tough. And so for our Bay Area listeners, I'm sorry for that. It's bad news. I know it's good for Las Vegas, who in the last 3 years, if you think about it, the Las Vegas, 5 years, NHL, then it gets the NFL, then it's got WNBA, then it's got, now it's going to get Major League Baseball. It's got F1, it's got the Final Four, it's got the Super Bowl. It just goes on and on. What's happened in Las Vegas from a sports perspective is unbelievable. And you
MLS
have to
too.
MLS, yes. You have to credit.
Looking at that.
You have to credit really the Raiders. The Raiders, that domino fell, and it was the biggest one because the NFL is the biggest one. So it'll be interesting. Okay, David. Now we're not going to talk to you before Thursday. Give me your best guess, your pick. What do the Raiders do in that first round? Do they get a guy at 7, whether it's Devin Witherspoon, whether it's somebody else, or do you think they're going to trade down?
Yeah, I think it's not the sexy answer, Scott, but I think they stick to number 7. I think Witherspoon goes with the Lions. I think Vegas ends up with Christian Gonzalez, and I think he's a great pick. I think a lot of fans should be happy about Christian Gonzalez if he ends up with the Raiders. I wouldn't be upset at all about that.
No, I think that's fine. Yeah, I think as long as they don't reach for somebody and they get the pick, they should get at that point. And I tend to agree with you. I think at 7, they're going to take one of the cornerbacks unless somebody just gives them so much to move down. But again, I just caution, if the Raiders trade down, they can't trade into the mid-20s. They can trade down into the 10, 11, 12, 13 maybe. But remember, New England needs a lot of defense. If they go past New England, whoever's there, they're going to grab too. So you got to be careful with it. So it'll be fun to watch. But we appreciate you sitting in for Mo.
I'm happy to do this, Scott. Especially, we got a couple guys. Look, we talked baseball on a football podcast wearing hockey gear.
Yes, wearing hockey gear. Both
I'm
wearing.
Really happy we were able to do this.
Not planned. For those of you watching on YouTube, you know what David's talking about. But not planned. But we both are wearing our Vegas Golden Knights gear tonight. Yeah, so it's one of those deals.
For the playoffs. And I'll be at Game 5 on Thursday night too. After watching some draft coverage, I'll be heading into T-Mobile for Game 5. So go Knights, go.
It'll be a good sports night for you. David, thanks, my friend.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, there you go. There you have it. Again, thank you guys for being with us. We want to thank Matt Holder of Bleacher Report for being with us, and for giving us some insight into the draft on Thursday. Reminder, our next show will drop Thursday morning, our little pre-draft. It'll also be available on YouTube at 8 a.m. Pacific as we try to get ahead, because you're not going to watch us when the draft's on. You're going to listen to us. Mo will be on the Bleacher Report app at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I will be on with Baldy and Jason La Canfora on the Odyssey app or on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page right when the Raiders pick. So you can listen to my reaction to the pick there as well. So make sure you tune in to that. For our producer, David Stepanian, I am Scott Gulbransen. We will talk to you guys on Thursday. Take care, Raider Nation.